Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Genevieve Westcott with your latest financial news from across New Zealand and around the globe. Joining us today is Tessa Price, the relatively new CEO of UDC. And Tessa, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
And you've joined the company that gave you your first job way back in 1997. Tell me all about it.
It was my first role out of university, and I was actually really grateful to have a job. I've spent the last 12 years working in Australia, so I'm a very proud Kiwi returning home.
What did you study when you were at university?
A really useful degree, a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish and Political Science, and a Bachelor of Commerce as well, and that really gave me my start in business.
Now, you've spent about 14 years, I reckon, working in financial institutions
Yes.
in Australia. Give me a quick checkered history of who you worked for and what you did.
Absolutely. The last 8 years I've worked for the Commonwealth Bank, and I had various roles within that organisation, including running our centenary project, which was really about showcasing us into the next 100 years. I've worked for icons such as Saatchi & Saatchi, which taught me a lot about communication, advertising, and I worked for a Sander down in Melbourne as well, which I really learnt about asset finance and car finance in that industry.
Now, you've worked in advertising, you've worked in public relations as well. What did you learn about doing business from those roles that you think will help UDC get more visibility in the marketplace?
Well, as I'm sure you know, a lot of it is about positioning, raising your profile, and really being true to who you are and your essence, and going to market with messages that your staff can really live and breathe on a daily basis. So that's the fundamental thing that I learned, and organisations have to be set up for success, and you have to talk to your strengths.
So who is UDC? You know, what are the values? What makes your company different from what, the 10 to 12 other finance companies in New Zealand?
Well, UDC is amazing. It's been around for over 74 years. We're part of the ANZ group, so we really have that strength. We're the largest, so we have collectively over 160 commercial managers throughout New Zealand. What I really like about the proposition also is we've got a debenture side of the book. So people invest in New Zealand, and this helps us actually lend to New Zealand businesses. So it's a really unique value proposition, and there's really no other bank that has a specialist asset finance arm in New Zealand. So for me, incredibly unique. It's got that history and the strength. It's got a AA- rating, which is the strongest rating you can possibly have.
Yeah, with Standard & Poor's, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you had a pretty terrific first 6 months of the year. Tell me more.
Yeah, we had a fantastic 6 months, so 18.7 million, which was up from 9.1 on the previous 6 months. And July year to date, we've seen double digits, so 10.1% growth, so that's really solid. We've seen some positive consumer sentiment coming through as well, so car sales year to date are up 16%. And in the agri section as well, we're seeing farmers actually replace, and our year to date numbers are 5% growth in agri as well, so that's really pleasing to see.
Let's talk a little bit about the farmers in the rural sector. How important is that to your business when it comes to growth? What's your market share at the moment, and what are you going for?
Look, it's a critical part of who we are, and I think, you know, when you're looking at the industry, there's been some interesting times. I mean, you know, with grumpy growth in New Zealand, you know, the world economy, let's face it, that keeps giving, you know, that New Zealand dollar that stubbornly remains high.
Yeah,
I think
incredible.
you know, it's been tough, but then, you know, on the brighter side too, we're seeing some really positive signs. So, you know, the US drought, that's not positive, but it's positive for our farmers. We've seen some excellent seasonal conditions, which has set us up for success. And, you know, when we look at our farmers, they are replacing the field days with some excellent car sales. Mitsubishi have seen pre-orders of tractors up by approximately 20%. And what we're seeing is farmers replacing critical items. So we fund things that are really important, such as tractors, harvesters and balers, and that's really, really good to see. But what we are seeing is people are planning shorter term. So they're buying the equipment when they need it.
Yeah, they're nervous. They're nervous. And tell me, now with the news out that Fonterra has just cut its next year's payout to dairy farmers, Westland Milk as well, that's going to affect your business, isn't it?
Look, absolutely, and one of the things that we're very conscious of is really matching payments and looking at income and cash flow, matching that to amortisation and depreciation. We also stress test, so we make sure that if there's a downturn in income, that people can actually keep paying, and that's a really important part of what we do at the moment, because we know that there's fluctuations. And that's the great thing about asset finance, is you do keep your cash, and then you can change your payments depending on those fluctuations. And we all know that farmers have seasonal payments coming through, so that's a big part of what we do.
Tessa, how's your lending growth tracking at the moment?
Lending growth is really good, so 10.1% year to date July, which is good to see, so good solid growth there.
Did you have any qualms about taking over a finance company? Even though you weren't here, you would have read that over the past 2 or 3 years, finance companies have taken a kicking. A lot of them have been up to a lot of dirty tricks. How did you feel taking over this role?
Well, it's an organisation that I know well, and it brings me great meaning coming back to it. It's an organisation that is part of the ANZ group that I also work for. So coming back, I didn't really have concerns, and I've been really pleasantly pleased to see the strength of the people within the organisation and the role that UDC is actually playing in New Zealand as well.
How do you like being a CEO?
I think it's, it's a little bit tougher than I expected, the buck stops with you.
Okay, tell me about that. How has it been for you? You've been there since what, June?
Yeah, so, 2 months in, and, what is fantastic about it is I've got people and I've had great support, and I've got the leadership of the ANZ. So David Hisco used to run UDC, Graham Turley, who heads commercial and agri, absolutely loves it. So from that perspective, fantastic support. But for me, you elevated the CEO, really, it's you, and the buck stops with you.
When you look out across the land, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth in your business?
Look, growth is patchy, and we're seeing it come from all sorts of different areas. We are seeing some signs of activities back in Christchurch, which was great. And I was down there recently. It was fantastic to see some of our clients in the red zone really helping that area and really helping with the rebuild. Some construction happening down there, but we're seeing it through all of New Zealand.
So you think we're on a bit of a roll, finally?
I think roll is probably, a bit out there, but definitely there's some growth happening.
Okay. Just before we go, what do you think it is about you? What lessons have you learned in life and in business that have put you in the CEO role at a relatively young age?
Well, thank you for that. I obviously look a bit younger than I actually am, and I feel. For me, it's been, networks are crucial, knowing people, having the right conversations at the right time. You have to be prepared to try new things. You have to be prepared to try new roles. And really, if you look at my career path, I've moved around a little bit. You've got to be determined. You've got to be resilient in these roles as well. And you've got to have a laugh from time to time and a bit of fun as well. So, those are the things that I would say are crucial. A bit of self-development as well doesn't go astray.
Tessa, thanks so much. Great having you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tessa. Coming up after the break, NBR Editor-in-Chief Nevil Gibson is in the house. Come back quick. Welcome back to Money Talks. Joining me now is Nevil Gibson, Editor-in-Chief of the National Business Review. And welcome, Nevil.
Hi, Genevieve.
Of course, the big news overnight, Fonterra has written down its payout for farmers by 30 cents a kilogram of milk solids. Not good news for the farmers.
Well, I think the good news is that it probably won't go any further, and this might be the end of it, because we're getting near to the end of the season anyway. And it's looking very good for next year, though, because the US drought has changed the whole dynamics of the dairy industry. And while there's going to be a lot of meat around as stock are killed off, there's going to be a big lift in prices because of the lack of stock in the end.
And of course, we're all waiting for Hurricane Isaacs to hit. Boy, I tell you what, the US of A is really being hammered. But let's talk a little more about dairy prices. Federated Farmers isn't convinced that the payout isn't going to drop even further. They may know more than you and I.
That could be right, but looking at it from a Queen Street point of view, you'd have to say that it probably won't go down any further because of what could happen in the future. And there's no doubt that as a food producer, New Zealand's looking very good. And most of the commentary around the world at the moment is that food prices are going to go up. We've got this from the Food and Agricultural Organisation, most economists, and you're going to see a big lift in quite a number of commodities because the key ingredients for a lot of food, especially in processed food, is soy and corn, not so much wheat or rice. But and it's also not just happening in the United States, also in Russia.
Yeah, it is in Russia as well.
So Australians are going to do very well with their crops.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what's not doing so well. Dairy, of course, remains our biggest commodity export. And I got to say, this high New Zealand dollar is really knocking everything for six. We hear today Solid Energy may be cutting hundreds of jobs. They're not selling coal. What's your take on that?
Well, obviously the market forces in coal, and that again could be quite a temporary thing because China is not going to switch away from coal, and neither is India. And it's really just a dampening down of the Chinese economy. It's still growing at over 8%, so that's pretty big. And the iron ore prices have come down, but that's because there's an oversupply of steel and that sort of thing around the world. We just have to wait and see until the Europeans start buying again. And the US is still pretty much on its knees again. Just come out overnight where some mixed signals. House prices are at a high, but manufacturing activity is fairly subdued.
Yeah, the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research, of course, overnight has come out saying that no surprise here for anybody who has to buy groceries. Food prices very high in New Zealand, and also oil prices.
Well, these are predictions, and when you're talking about high oil prices, because they're still under $100, so that's pretty good, because if oil goes too high, it does have a dampening effect on the economy. So at the moment it's down. It's been down for quite a while.
Yeah,
so
but
that's a good sign.
Yeah, it's a good sign, but meantime, all those oil rigs sitting off the Gulf Coast are waiting to be hit by Hurricane Isaacs.
Well, I've seen the media overcook one of these storms before, and who knows, it may be over in a week.
It is hurricane season, and you know what? Anybody who lives in the deep south of the US of A knows that this comes around all the time. But this one is already up at what, level 1? It's going to really hammer them. Well, they've spent a lot of money bunkering down in New Orleans, so it'll be interesting to see just how that city fares. Apparently there's not going to be any flooding or anything like that. It's just the rainfall. And of course the rainfall is what they want. Yeah. Now, going back to dairy, if we could, because not only Fonterra but Westlands have also slashed the forecast payouts coming up. They're saying that it could cost Fonterra, it could cost the rural economy $500 million. The farming community is going to take quite a hit from that, aren't they? Oh, yeah, but in the context of several tens of billions, it's probably not that big, and it's certainly about the same level it was a couple of years ago. So it's not the end of the world by a long stretch. And you mentioned before about the dollar. Well, the dollar's going to stay where it is. And in fact, we've got some commentary this week that it's probably going to go a little bit higher. It could, yes, that's correct. Against the US dollar, remember. And the thing is that the US dollar is very, very weak. And it's likely to get weaker, and it's now being dragged down by the euro. And of course, everybody's waiting for Friday. We're going to hear from of course, Ben Bernanke. You know, are we going to see more money printing in the US of A? Well, this is the bizarre thing, the market waiting for him to loosen further when you're already at zero interest rates and as much money pumped into the economy as you can get. It's election time too, of course. I think that's quite unwise. They need to tighten up. And only when you've done that will the economy improve. And yet some of the latest economic data coming out of the States seems to be a little bit stronger. People are spending a bit more, housing is up, more people in work. That's right, and the work thing's quite important because the United States has got quite a restrictive labour market, and there's been quite a big development in Germany where they just abolished tax rates on what they call mini jobs. You can have part-time work and pay no tax. England is picking this up, so that's going to be the UK government's answer. It's already done to a degree in Scandinavia, and there's been arguments in the Wall Street Journal, other opinion places like that, that the United States could liberalise its labour market even further, and then you might see something happening. Moving here to New Zealand, over the past week we've seen rather lacklustre company results by and large. Would you agree with that? Not necessarily. Two of the strongest were Helleby's and Skitterup, with big exposure to the rural community. There's a difference in the way some of these companies are run. You know, if you're retail, there's not a lot you can do if consumers are staying away, but you can grab a little bit of market share. And it's interesting to note that a lot of companies in the share market, they go down for a bit, but they react very quickly and they make a turnaround. Pumpkin Patch is one, Briscoe's is another. So you can see improvements pretty quickly. Even Michael Hill Jeweller, which operates purely in the luxury area, they brought through a good result. But I thought the Helleby's and Skitterup one shows you that are well run. Even these are conglomerate type companies with a lot of diverse activities, but just shows you how well it can be done. Of course,
Fletcher's is in the other. They're very much driven by the building industry, both here in Australia and elsewhere.
Yeah, and
and
yet
it's tough for them, and they're going to have to reduce their staff numbers. They haven't said so as much, but that'll probably happen. But Christchurch could be their, one of their saviours. They've been hanging out for Christchurch for a long time.
We have been, and are you seeing any sign that there's going to be some serious rebuilding and getting on with business in Christchurch?
There's just one that's just broken, which is to rebuild a dining and
that's right.
The Oxford Street quarter.
Yeah, they're talking about what, $40 million they're going to pump into
this.
Yeah, that's
huge, and I think there's a lot of excitement, and I've seen a lot of pictures in overseas newspapers of some of the architectural things in Christchurch. So there's a lot of interest in these shops that are in containers and some of these new swanky low-rise type buildings. So
but here's
there's
the question.
A lot of excitement.
Do you need a new dining strip and a shopping strip, or do you need houses? Come on, what's going on?
Well, they're going to combine both. They do need to move a lot of people back into the centre of the city. Otherwise, it'll be a bit like a donut. So to combine the retail with the residential, and it's happened in a number of other cities which have done very good jobs of making themselves over. And Manchester's one example that was outlined in The Economist recently, where they've moved a lot of people into the centre of Manchester, and those northern cities in England, which we used to be sort of rust cities, a bit like Detroit.
Yeah, that's
they've actually come back to
down.
life. They've attracted a lot of immigration and people who like that excitement, and I think Christchurch will find it'll be attracting a lot of people if that sort of living appeals to people.
I hope so, because the entire economy depends desperately on that kickstart, let's face it.
That's right, and we're still in a position where we're keeping immigrants out rather than attracting them in, and we need a bit of a change of mentality about that. But I just think we should have open door policy.
I tell you what, one company that's done fabulously well is Mighty River Power. And here's a funny thing, they've just produced, what, $100 million in dividends for the government. Why is the government selling off its jewels? Why, you have a portfolio. Don't you get rid of the dogs? Don't you get rid of the dogs first?
Well, I'd say actually the NBA editorial last week urged them to forget about solid energy, just get it sold, because a company like that really needs a share market discipline to turn around quickly. I mentioned how retailers do it. Why not do it with solid energy? Maybe the staff announcement that's coming up today might be a political thing, but people have got to understand these companies operate in a global market. They've got to make tough decisions. It's a lot easier to do that on the share market with a lot of shareholders saying, hey, what are you doing about it? Rather than making it a political decision.
Yeah, but what about Mighty River Power? Do you think the government should still go ahead and sell this off?
Oh, definitely.
You do?
The problem with these companies, the power companies, and forgetting about the water for a moment, is that they're not really high growth ones, and overhanging them is some major power producers who may not be wanting that power in a few years' time. In other words, there's going to be no new capacity. But Mighty River is very clever in geothermal, and that can be exported. These companies could take on a whole new life with a different makeover, not necessarily in the personnel or even the directors, but having that the public in as a half shareholder would do great things for them, and they'll also have access to raising capital more easily.
Thanks, Neville. Coming up after the break, future proof on the highways and byways of the economic world, as our expert points out what's coming up. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Money Talks, and now it's time for Future Proof. What's on the radar for our guest? And Neville, let's talk about Kiwis apparently now leading the world almost in being bargain shoppers because of the tough economic times.
We're bargain shopping champions, there's no question about it. We got hold of some research from Nielsen that shows that up to 70% of New Zealanders going to do their shopping in supermarkets buy the bargain that is on that week. They're not loyal to the brand until that, and everything from toilet paper, coffee, all these sort of things where there's one brand is on special each week, that is the brand that sells, and for the rest of, until their turn comes around, the other brands don't do so well.
When I first came to New Zealand quite a few years ago, I did notice that's when we sort of were just beginning to see generic brands in the supermarkets, and I know that a lot of people were kind of embarrassed to be seen buying it. I think that's changed remarkably.
Oh, it has, and both supermarkets have got their own brands, and one of them, Pam's, is huge. But you look at the packaging and you can say, oh, that one was made by Sanitarium or whoever, or Arbids. You know, so the big manufacturers make these products as well. They might change the formula a bit, but if you think the product is not that, you know, there's not much difference between brands of petrol or brands of laundry paper, you will buy the laundry powder, that is, or toilet paper. Basically, you'll buy the cheapest.
Yeah, and I suppose it's good news for the duopolies, but what about all the other grocery suppliers? How are they going to get around that?
Well, it's very tough for them. That's the whole point. The two supermarkets, and it's no different in Australia, basically say if you don't sell us your brand and we will decide when it goes on special and all that sort of thing. One or two people make these decisions, and but it does keep the prices down, you've got to say that.
And wine prices, what's the latest news? Because I know you're a wine aficionado.
I wouldn't say that, but I like the price.
Yeah, and you like a drop.
Well, Lion, one of the not your biggest wine seller, but they have a lot of the cheaper brands in New Zealand. They've told the growers and the retailers rather that they've put the prices up. So they've taken a lead, which is quite a brave act for them to do. But they're looking at a big shortage of wine in the current harvest, and that's the main reason there. But the supermarkets, I went in there on Sunday, and sure enough, there was a whole lot of $7 and $8 wine, some of it from Chile. They will find this wine, don't worry about that. It's going to go under $10 and stay there for quite a while until the world runs out of wine.
Okay, good to know, I suppose,
the
for us.
The Australians have just had their biggest harvest ever.
Have they?
So there'll be a lot of cheap... Yeah, the newspapers are rather disparagingly call it plonk, but it's not plonk. It's really good quality, and you can get it for $10.
Okay, good to know.
Who's to complain?
Oh, well, the growers, perhaps, I don't know.
Oh, they're going to do all right.
Are they going to do okay this time? That's
but
good to know.
If they have a good year, they'll plant more. They haven't planted for several years now, so obviously supply is a constraining factor at the moment on the industry.
Neville, what else are you going to be keeping your eye on over the next 7 days?
Well, one of the interesting things is what's going on around the world, and it is the summer months, and you've got to say that there's a lack of news economically speaking, or not so much, there's not that momentum, but as we head into the northern winter, you're going to see a lot more statistics and that sort of thing. And I'd say that the euro's coming to a bit of a head. The ECB is not attending the Jackson Hole Talk Fest that's coming up for the central bankers. That's a huge development that Mr Draghi decides that he's got more important work back in Europe.
Yeah, that's a bit of a slap in the face for the Americans, is it not?
Well, you're led to believe that these are very important events with all the central bankers there and that sort of thing. But
you think
there's
it's
a lot
just
of
a photo op. You think it's a big photo op.
Oh well, you know, like a lot of these things, it's held in a very nice place. I've never been there. Have you?
No, I haven't been to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. We must get there. Where's my invitation? I wonder. Anyway.
Well, there's lots of journalists turn up to these things as well, so I guess not much is going to happen.
Okay, I say let's get our passports. See you at the airport. Thanks to my guests, Tessa Price and Nevil Gibson. Be sure to check out our website at country99tv.co.nz for the latest updates on rural developments both at home and abroad. And in honor of Tessa's visit here today, we thought of that old saying, girls can do anything, anywhere.
3 balls and a strike to count to Brent Johnson. 1 out, top of the 7th inning. Fresno 2, Tacoma 1. Santos in a jam. Johnson his first year at AAA. From the set he deals. That swung on and driven deep down the left field line. Toward the corner, and this ball is going to be... Oh, it's caught! It's not Jake Wald. That's the ball girl. Jake Wald in left field, can't believe it. And look, she shows him up. She just sort of tosses him the ball, saying, take that, Jake. I don't see you making the effort. Alfonso, the catcher, he can't believe it. Let's look at that replay. Oh, my. What an amazing play. And now look at her, sitting there saying, no big deal.
Keep the faith. See you next time.